Chapter 26, The Television Chocolate Room. The TV family, together with Charlie and Grandpa Joe, stepped out of the lift into a room so dazzlingly bright and dazzlingly white that they screwed up their eyes in pain and stopped walking. Mr. Wonka handed each of them a pair of dark glasses and said, "Put these on quick, and don't take them off in here whatever you do, this light could blind you." As soon as Charlie had his dark glasses on, he was able to look around in comfort. He saw a long, white, narrow room. The room was painted white all over, even the floor was white, and there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. From the ceiling, huge lamps hung down and bathed the room in a brilliant blue-white light. The room was completely bare except at the far ends. At one of these ends there was an enormous camera on wheels, and a whole army of Oompa Loompas was clustering around it, oiling its joints and adjusting its knobs and polishing its great glass lens. The Oompa Loompas were all dressed in the most extraordinary way. They were wearing bright red spacesuits, complete with helmets and goggles. Well, at least they looked like spacesuits. And they were working in complete silence. Watching them, Charlie experienced a strange sense of danger. There was something dangerous about this whole business, and the Oompa Loompas knew it. There was no chattering or singing among them, and they moved about over the huge black camera slowly and carefully in their scarlet spacesuits. At the other end of the room, about 50 paces away from the camera, a single Oompa Loompa, also wearing a spacesuit, was sitting at a black table gazing at the screen of a large television. "Here we go," cried Mr. Wonka, hopping up and down with excitement. "This is the testing room for my latest and greatest invention, television chocolate." "But what is television chocolate?" asked Mike TV. "Good heavens, Charles, stop interrupting me," said Mr. Wonka. "It works by television. I don't like television myself. I suppose it's all right in small doses. But children never seem to be able to take it in small doses. They want to sit there all day long staring and staring at the screen." "That's me," said Mike TV. "Shut up," said Mr. TV. "Thank you," said Mr. Wonka. "I shall now tell you how this amazing television set of mine works. But first of all, do you know how ordinary television works? It's very simple. At one end, where the picture is being taken, you have a large cine camera and you start photographing something. The photographs are then split up into millions of tiny little pieces which are so small that you cannot see them, and these tiny little pieces are shot out into the sky by electricity. In the sky they go whizzing around all over the place until suddenly they hit the antenna on a roof of somebody's house. Then they go flashing down the wire that leads right into the back of a television set, and in there they get jiggled and joggled around until at last every piece of one of those millions of tiny little pieces is fitted back into the right place, just like a giant jigsaw puzzle. And hey, presto, the photographs appears on screen." "That isn't exactly how it works," Mike TV said. "I'm a little bit deaf in my left ear," said Mr. Wonka. "You must forgive me if I don't hear everything you say." "I said that's not how it works," shouted Mike TV. "You're a nice boy," Mr. Wonka said, "but you talk too much. Now then, this is the very first time I saw ordinary television working, I was struck by a tremendous idea. Look here," I shouted. "These people can break up a photograph into millions of pieces and send them pieces whizzing through the air and then put them all together at the other end. Then why can't I do the same thing with a bar of chocolate? Why can't I send a real bar of chocolate whizzing through the air in tiny pieces and then put all the pieces together again at the end, ready to be eaten?" "Impossible," said Mike TV. "You think so?" cried Mr. Wonka. "Well, watch this. I shall now send a bar of my very best chocolate from one end of this room to the other by television. Be ready there. Bring in the chocolate." Immediately, 6 Oompa Loompas marched forward, carrying on their shoulders the most enormous bar of chocolate Charlie had ever seen. It was about the size of the mattress he slept on at home. "It has to be big," Mr. Wonka explained, "because whenever you send something by television, it always comes out much smaller than it was when it went in. Even with ordinary television. When you photograph a big man, he never comes out. He comes out on your screen no taller than any pencil, does he? Here we go then, get ready. No, stop, hold everything. You there, Mike TV, stand back. You're too close to the camera. There are dangerous rays coming out of that thing. They could break you up into a million tiny little pieces in 1 second. That's why the Oompa Loompas are wearing spacesuits. The suits protect them. All right, now that's better. Now then, switch on." One of the Oompa Loompas caught hold of the large switch and pulled it down. There was a blinding flash. "The chocolate's gone!" shouted Grandpa Joe, waving his arms. He was quite right. The enormous bar of chocolate had disappeared completely into thin air. "It's on its way," cried Mr. Wonka. "It's now rushing through the air above our heads in a million tiny pieces. Quick, come over here." He dashed over to the other end of the room where the large television set was standing, and the others followed him. "Watch the screen," he cried. "Look, here it comes, look." The screen flickered and lit up. Then suddenly a small bar of chocolate appeared in the middle of the screen. "Take it," said Mr. Wonka, growing more and more excited. "How can you take it?" asked Mike TV, laughing. "It's just a picture on the television screen." "Charlie Bucket," cried Mr. Wonka, "you take it. Reach out and grab it." Charlie put out his hand and touched the screen, and suddenly, miraculously, the bar of chocolate came away in his fingers. He was so surprised he nearly dropped it. Eat it, shouted Mr. Wonka. Go on and eat it. It'll be delicious. It's the same bar, it's just got smaller on its journey, that's all. It's absolutely fantastic, gasped Grandpa Joe. It's a miracle. Just imagine, cried Mr. Wonka. When I start using this across the country, you'll be sitting at home watching television, and suddenly a commercial will flash on screen, and a voice will say, "Eat Wonka's chocolates, they're the best in the world. If you don't believe us, try one now for yourself. Now." And then you simply reach out and take it. How about that, eh? Terrific, said Grandpa Joe. It will change the world. Chapter 27. Mike TV is sent by television. Mike TV was even more excited than Grandpa Joe at seeing a bar of chocolate being sent by television. But Mr. Wonka, he shouted, can you send other things through the air in the same way? Breakfast cereal, for instance. Oh, my sainted aunt, cried Mr. Wonka, don't you mention that disgusting stuff in front of me. Do you know what breakfast cereal is made of? It's made of those curly wooden shavings you find in pencil sharpeners. But could you send it by television if you wanted to, as you do chocolate? Asked Mike TV. Of course I could. And what about people? Asked Mike TV. Could you send a real-life person from one place to another place in the same way? A person, cried Mr. Wonka. Are you off your rocker? But could it be done? Good heavens, child, I really don't know. I suppose it could. I mean, yes, I'm pretty sure it could. Well, of course it could. I wouldn't like to risk it, though. There's been some nasty, terrible results. But Mike TV was already off and running. The moment he heard Mr. Wonka saying, I'm pretty sure it could, of course it could, he turned away and started running as fast as he could towards the other end of the room where the great camera was standing. Look at me, he shouted as he ran. I'm going to be the first person in the world to be sent by television. No, 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 cried Mr. Wonka. Mike, screamed Mrs. TV, stop, come back. You'll be turned into a million tiny pieces. But there was no stopping Mike TV now. The crazy boy rushed on, and when he reached the enormous camera, he jumped straight for the switch, scattering Oompa Loompas left, right, and as he went. See you later, alligator, he shouted, and he pulled down on the switch, and as he did so, he leapt out into the full glare of the mighty lens. There was a blinding flash. Then there was silence. Then Mrs. TV ran forward, but she stopped, dead, in the middle of the room, and she stood there. She stood staring at the place where her son had been, and her great red mouth opened wide, and she screamed, He's gone! He's gone! Good heavens, he has gone, shouted Mr. TV. Mr. Wonka hurried forward and placed a hand gently on Mrs. TV's shoulder. We shall have to hope for the best, he said. We must pray that your little boy will come out unharmed at the other end. Mike, screamed Mrs. TV, clasping her head in her hands, where are you? I'll tell you where he is, said Mr. TV. He's risen above our heads in a tiny million pieces. Don't talk about it, wailed Mrs. TV. We must watch the television set, said Mr. Wonka. He may come through any moment. Mr. and Mrs. TV, Grandpa Joe and little Charlie and Mr. Wonka all gathered round the television and stared tensely at the screen. The screen was quite blank. It's taken a heck of a long time to come across, said Mr. TV, wiping his brow. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, said Mr. Wonka. I do hope that no parts of him get left behind. What on earth do you mean? Asked Mr. TV sharply. I don't wish to alarm you, said Mr. Wonka, but it does so happen sometimes that only about half the little pieces make their way to the television set. It only happened last week. I don't know why, but the result was that only half a bar of chocolate came through. Mrs. TV let out a scream of horror. You mean only half a Mike might be coming back to us, she cried. Let's hope it's the top half, said Mr. TV. Hold everything. Watch the screen. Something's happening. The screen had suddenly begun to flicker. Then some wavy lines appeared. Mr. Wonka adjusted one of the knobs and the wavy lines went away. And now very, very slowly, the screen began to get brighter and brighter and brighter. Here he comes, yelled Mr. Wonka. That's him, all right. Is he in one piece? Cried Mrs. TV. I'm not sure. It's too early to tell, said Mr. Wonka. Faintly at first, but becoming clearer and clearer, every second, the picture of Mike TV appeared on the screen. He was standing up and waving at the audience and grinning from ear to ear. But he's so small, shouted Mr. TV. Mike, cried Mrs. TV, are you all right? Are there any bits of you missing? Isn't he going to get any bigger? Asked Mr. TV. Talk to me, Mike, said Mrs. TV. Say something. Tell me you're all right. A tiny voice no louder than the squeaking of a mouse came out of the television set. Hi, Mum. Hi, Pop. Look at me. I'm the first ever person sent by television. Grab him, ordered Mr. Wonka. Quick. Mrs. TV shot out her hand and picked up the tiny figure of Mike TV out the screen. Hooray! He's all in one piece. He's completely unharmed. You call that unharmed? Snapped Mrs. TV, peering at the little speck of a boy who was now running to and fro across the palm of her hand, waving pistols in the air. He was certainly not more than an inch tall. He's shrunk, said Mr. TV. Of course he's shrunk. What did you expect? Oh, this is terrible, wailed Mrs. TV. What are we going to do? And Mr. TV said, well, we can't send him back to school like this. He'll get trodden on. He'll get squashed. He won't be able to do anything, cried Mrs. TV. Oh, yes, I will, squeaked the tiny voice of Mike. I'll still be able to watch television. Never again, shouted Mr. TV. I'm throwing the television set right out the window the moment we get home. I've had enough of this television. When he heard this, Mike TV flew into a terrible tantrum. He started jumping up and down on the palm of his mother's hand, screaming and yelling and trying to bite her fingers. I want to watch television, he squeaked. I want to watch television. I want to watch television. I want to watch television. Here, give him to me, said Mr. TV, and he took the tiny boy, shoved him into the breast pocket of his jacket, and stuffed a handkerchief on top. Squeals and yells came from inside the pocket, and the pocket shook as the furious little prisoner fought to get out. Oh, Mr. Wonka, said Mrs. TV, how can we make him grow? Well, said Mr. Wonka, stroking his beard and gazing thoughtfully at the ceiling, I must say that's a wee bit tricky, but small boys are extremely springy and elastic. They'll stretch like mad. So what we'll do is we'll put him into a special machine I have for testing the stretchiness of chewing gum. Maybe that will bring him back to how he was. Oh, thank you, said Mrs. TV. You don't mention it, my dear lady. How far do you think he'll stretch? Asked Mr. TV. Maybe miles? Who knows? But he'll be awfully thin. Everything gets thinner when you stretch it. You mean like chewing gum? Asked Mr. TV. Exactly. Well, how thin will he be? I haven't the foggiest idea, said Mr. Wonka, and it really doesn't matter anyway, because we'll soon fatten him up again. And all we'll have to do is give him a triple dose of my wonderful super vitamin chocolate. Super vitamin chocolate contains huge amounts of vitamin A and vitamin B. Also contains vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin F, vitamin G, vitamin I, vitamin J, vitamin K, vitamin L, vitamin M, vitamin N, vitamin O, vitamin P, vitamin Q, vitamin R, vitamin T, vitamin U, vitamin V, vitamin W, vitamin X, vitamin Y, and believe it or not, vitamin X. The only two vitamins it doesn't have in it are vitamin S, because it makes you sick, and vitamin H, because it makes you grow horns on the top of your head, like a bull. But it does have in it a very, very small amount of the rarest and most magical vitamin of them all, vitamin Wonka. And what will that do to him? It'll make him grow toes out. It'll make his toes grow out until they're as long as his fingers. Oh no, cried Mrs. TV. Don't be silly, it's the most useful. He'll be able to play the piano with his feet. But Mr. Wonka, no arguments, please, said Mr. Wonka. He turned away and clicked his fingers 3 times in the air. An Oompa Loompa appeared immediately and stood beside him. Follow these orders, he said, handing the Oompa Loompa a piece of paper on which he had written a full set of instructions. And you'll find the boy in his father's pocket. Off you go, goodbye, Mr. TV, goodbye, Mrs. TV, and please don't look so worried. They'll all come out in the wash, you know, every one of them. At the end of the room, the Oompa Loompas around the giant camera were already beating their tiny drums and beginning to jog up and down to the rhythm. There they go again, said Mr. Wonka. I'm afraid you can't stop them singing. Little Charlie caught Grandpa Joe's hand, and the two of them stood beside Mr. Wonka in the middle of the long, bright room, listening to the Oompa Loompas. And this is what they sang. The most important thing we've learned, as far as children are concerned, is never, ever, ever let them sit near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiot thing at all. In almost every house we've been, we've watched them gaping at the screen. They'll loll and slope and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week in someone's place we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they're hypnotised by it. Until they're absolutely drunk with all that shocking, ghastly junk. Oh yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the windowsill. They never fight or kick or punch, so leaves you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But do you ever stop to think? To wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved tot? It rots the senses in the head. It kills imagination dead. It clogs up and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind. He can no longer understand a fantasy, a fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. All right, you'll cry, all right, you'll say. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain? Oh, darling children, please explain. We'll answer this by asking you, what used the darling ones to do? How used to keep themselves contained before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten, don't you know? We'll say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They'd read and read and read and read, and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott, gadzooks, 1/2 their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore, books cluttered up the nursery floor, and in the bedroom by the bed more books were waiting to be read. Such wondrous fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens and whales, and treasure isles and distant shores where smugglers rowed with muffled oars, and pirates wearing purple pants, and sailing ships and elephants. and cannibals crouching round the pot, stirring away at something hot. It smells so good, what can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope. The younger ones had Beatrix Potter with Mr. Todd the Dirty Rotter, with Squirrel Nutkin, Piglin Bland, and Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, and just how the camel got his hump, and how the monkey lost his rump, and Mr. Toad, and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Mole. Oh, books, what books they used to know, those children living long ago. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV sets away, and in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. Then fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks, the screams and yells, the bites and kicks, and children hitting you with sticks. Fear not, because we promise you that in a week or two of having nothing else to do, they now begin to feel the need of having something good to read. And once they start, oh boy, you'll watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen, they'll wonder what they'd ever seen in a ridiculous machine, that nauseating, foul, unclean, repulsive television screen. And later, each and every kid will love you more for what you did. P.S. Regarding my TV, we very much regret that we shall simply have to wait and see if we can get him back to his height, but if we can't, it serves him right.